Jason. I started the band in about 1988, and just me and a couple of crappy pre-sequencer drum machines and a guitar and a 4-track, and looking for a word that was synonymous with understanding. Acumen was in the thesaurus, and that's how it started.
I'm Ethan Novak. I started in 1990 in a different capacity of running films and digital stock as such. Joined playing in 91. That's my bitch.
I have no idea when I started.
93.
Alright. My name is Greg Lopez. I started playing in 1993, doing bass and then also drums.
I'm Elliot. I met these guys and joined in late 99, playing bass.
I'm Brian Elza. I met them around 97 or 98 at their shows and then started playing with them around 2003 or 4.
2003.
2003 because I'm really good at guitar and I'm a really big fan.
Nice.
I'm Dan Brill. I play drums. Started 2002 with Acumen Nation.
All right. So Acumen Nation has seen a lot of changes within the last 20 years, fluxes of members, hiatuses, reformations, and renewals. What was the driving force in keeping the band strong?
I'm gonna take the credit because I started it and I wrote these songs and I kept it going and I wanted to make a record every year if I could. And at night when other people are thinking about other things, I'm thinking about beats and melodies and what other tunes can be brought out. And it was something that I knew that I had to keep doing. And if I had my brother with me, or if I had my new brothers with me, or if I had a stand-in, I was still going to be, keeping this going, and I was going to be comfortable with the fact that if you went to see an Acumen show, that I would definitely be there even if other people were going to interchange. And, my partner Jamie since 1994 was with us. That's when we played our first show. Our first show with Jamie Duffy was in '94, and he got to open for KMFDM in front of a sold-out crowd.
Lucky bastard.
Whereas the three of us had put in 3 years previous, slugging it out in some of the shittiest bars and clubs you can imagine for 30 people. So when Jamie joined, he thought, this is great. This is what you guys do? No, this is a real rare event, catering and a sold-out crowd. But I have definitely, as long as I wanted to make music and keep it going, that's why albums kept going.
Okay. Now, shortly after Acumen became Acumen Nation, the band split its directions as you, Jason, and Jamie created DJ AcuCrap, while Acumen Nation observed its industrial rock roots. What was the inspiration behind that branch off?
Honestly, it was Slip Disc. And it was the fact that a lot of people, as we progressed, we like to incorporate more music as our albums progressed through Transmissions, which the original Transmissions from Evil had no live drums. It was all programmed drums, guitars, and vocals. Then we got signed to Fifth Column Records, and they let us rebuild the album, but we added live drums and a more live show element to it. And then Transmissions was its thing, but then once we got to more Human Heart, that was more melody and more.
There was another record too.
I said that already, didn't I?
No, you just said Transmissions.
Oh, I said Transmissions twice. I think of Transmissions as Transmissions to Aaron. Transmissions from
Yeah, territory for me.
But a lot of people started bothering us with the more musical we got, and they said, we really love your programming. We want to hear your beats. We want to hear this stuff. And we actually had people saying, can you just make copies of what's on your backing tracks and release that and make that? And at the same time, Slip Disc, which was a new label that started in Chicago, was sort of saying, we're looking for an electronic, masthead for a label, like an imprint or whatever, and it just sort of was synergy. And we said, we have this group of people that want to hear this music. We have a lot of stuff in store. We'd love to get more involved in DJ culture, and they said we want somebody to spearhead that for us. So they gave us an imprint called Lost in Bass, and the intention was to take all these backing tracks that we had never really used and release them, but it seemed like why not just write new material that was fully digital, and that's how AccuCrack came to be. You know, because it was just another branch to do. And when we did that, Acumen had just signed a Conscience, so we just had a really nice record deal and a nice advance. I mean, we weren't floundering or anything, but it was just why not expand and do more. And especially because Acumen was getting more melodic and more, you know, maybe possibly moving a little bit away from 4 on the floor dance stuff. And then another company came along and said, we want you just to do 4 on the floor dance stuff. It was a very safe way to separate the two, you know, and do it that way.
Okay. Live Farewell 2001 was meant to signify an indefinite hiatus for Acumen Nation. However, in 2006, the band returned with Anticore. What determined the release of that album?
Probably the two previous albums. There was 2002's Fifth Column. So we only took a little hiatus for a year, and then we came back and did Fifth Column. And a lot of people thought after our abomination of Strike 4, which was
No sequences.
no sequences, no loops, and it was
All melody. Melody. Ooh.
Oh no, wait,
Our-
there was a couple of them.
there was a couple of loops, but
Couple loops.
our record labels had folded, and we were really into we loved the Deftones, and at the time Chicago was having a real big explosion of new metal, and a lot of bands were getting signed, and we were like, we're dying, we have to stay alive. And I have to admit, I think we kind of just sold out, and we were like, we need to do what we love, which was melody-driven metal at the time, and that's what's getting signed in Chicago. So if Acumen gets to live, we have to kind of do this to get, and actually we talked about it, we thought if we did the Strike 4 demos, and we got a deal, then we could be like, okay, now let's incorporate back what we had been doing before, but at least we could get a record deal and keep going.
Yeah.
And it kind of backfired.
It wasn't uncommon though. If you took out the electronics from 16 Volt and Clay People time, like you'd still have really great rock songs. You weren't doing anything crazy.
But we just took out the electronics,
Yeah.
you know, and so we lost a good portion of our fans, and we didn't get the record deal. So it was sort of a self-sabotage moment where, in retrospect, you know, we really, I was talking about this earlier, nobody was really making headlines and waves in cold wave or rock with industrial, and I think that gave us the wrong, like we took the wrong approach to that. We're like, well, if no one else is doing it, maybe we should be doing it. And if 20 years later, 15 years later, we should have just made the ugliest, most beat-driven, heavy guitar. Like we should have taken it and said that's because the reason it's not there is because they're waiting for us to do it. But we were kind of a
Well,
Didn't have that
too
kind of
many
thinking.
bands did sound like Korn around that time, so
Nah.
we did have to kind of put our stamp on it. But yeah, no, you make a good point.
So yeah, when you bring up Anticore, though, we had already done Fifth Column and Lord of the Cynics, which were kind of our return to making Acumen records. A lot of people thought Fifth Column was a great return to form after More Human Heart was kind of melodic, a little bit chill, and Fifth Column was a purposeful intent to get back on the way people appreciated our music, and it was successful. And then we got to Lord of the Cynics. Lord of the Cynics has its own stain because Jamie had gotten a huge gig doing tour sound for Saves the Day, Taking Back Sunday. He was gone all year. So we all started recording this record, Jamie including, and then he left. And he was always the guy that produced everything, so we were left to produce the record ourselves. And that's why many would say that, again, if you're into Acumen music, Lord of the Cynics has some great songs, but the production is...
It's the first industrial black metal record because it's just
Because-
so extreme.
There's some
stuff on there.
And because,
It is.
and I quote from a review of the album, you can filter your coffee through the snare drum.
The snare drum sounds like a coffee filter.
No,
Yeah.
no, it was the snare drum is mixed so thin you could filter coffee.
There you
Yes.
go.
And
So Dan got his endorsement with Mr. Coffee.
and you think Jay,
And I've been up ever since.
and we put that record together, Elliot and Dan and I, with Jamie in absence, doing the best we could, but not knowing how he did things, and
How you doing, buddy?
that was...
I love that you have that in your arms, dude. That's awesome.
So, after leaving to pursue Cordy, Ethan returned to Acumen Nation for the Psycho Transhumanoid tour taking place in 2007 and 2008.
I did split for a minute to go do
enjoyed
Cordy
that.
with Suzanne Sokol
Oh,
from Brute
Jesus.
Salt and thought that like it was going to be an easy thing to just go, cool, fine, I played in this band for a number of years and we did really well. And maybe taking a little bit more credence of like, wow, I didn't have that as much ownership as I thought because it wasn't as easy to just branch off and do something different. But anyway, I had actually moved to Los Angeles and was still, you know, obviously it's my brother, so I appreciate everything he does artistically, but I actually really liked the stuff they were doing and it was really cool. And he had called me up and said, hey, there's a possibility for this tour. Do you want to maybe get involved? And since obviously Dan had joined the band, and by the way, I did recommend Dan, and that was the only choice. There were no auditions. There was basically the torch passed to this gentleman.
But we still
I
love
use
you.
that term loosely. But,
At the time that you bring up,
I'll be at such.
at the time that you bring up,
A little bit
it
of
was
torch.
about 2000, and Ethan was, you know, he obviously wanted to do something different, and it was time for him to move on.
Let's-
he
okay, let's-
recommended Dan Brill, and that's how Dan Brill has become.
if you guys want to get down to brass tacks, here's how it went. Is I was playing. Acumen had done this House of Blues show, which was technically some sort of farewell show. We had done this show called Roach Fest, which we had a super short set. It was underappreciated by the crowd that was there because they were expecting something else. So we did our own show, this fun final last blast show at House of Blues, played a 90-minute set, threw a bunch of stuff in there that was like, I mean, we played a one song that we'd never, ever played live, and maybe with good reason, I'm not sure, Cancerine. And did this show, and for some reason that was kind of Acumen being put on hiatus for some reason. And I started playing drums with Accu-Crack, in the meantime starting the Cordy thing. And I was really excited about where the direction was going for Strike 4 musically. That was where I was going. I wanted organics, I wanted that shit, and I wanted the machines taken out more and more, even to the point of More Human Heart. Oh, really?
Scratching my throat.
Wow. Alright.
We have to admit it. We tried something different and it killed us, you know. In retrospect, when you're older and wiser, it's like, don't shit where you eat, and we...
Clay people would have said the same shit right
No,
here.
they did the same thing, you know.
They would have, and 16 volt would have too. It's
16
like
volt, a lot of
we tried
people did
to
it.
to put melody into what we were doing, and people didn't accept it. But that's the best parts of those albums.
But
in my
I'm
opinion.
also saying, as a, you know, being older and wiser, we killed ourselves. Like saying that we want to do something different. Like, no, you
Also,
have.
you
You're
know what?
lucky enough to have a fan base.
Only
You're lucky enough to have a business.
1% of musicians get to make it, but you haven't
Okay.
killed yourself. You're still doing it.
So if
you're still making
if you
good
take
music.
art versus commerce, if I make the greatest paper towel, and then you know what? My whole life I've always wanted a black paper towel that had like Nazi symbols on it.
No.
And I start making,
In that time, you were also unveiling DJ Accu-Crack's Humanoids of the Deep release. What was it like to promote both acts simultaneously?
It was awesome, but it was really hard. It seemed, because we had this little label, Crack Nation, and if you wanted to ramp up a release, it cost a lot of money and a lot of effort. And it seemed a good idea to why not ramp up 2 releases?
Right.
And most labels don't ever do this, right? I mean, they focus on one. But if you're gonna service a record, you could just send a second record. All that's gonna take is to like put up a, you know, if you're gonna promote something, you might as well put somethings on it. And it just seemed like after we did this album called Anicore, and we went in, Acumen went in the most metal direction ever, and it got, you know, it just didn't really work out. And it was the most collaborative effort that had ever occurred amongst this band. Was this band Anicore, this record Anicore? All of us participated in the writing, and we believed in it so much. We spent a lot of time on it, and then the label that we signed it over to just shat on it. Everything just fell apart. Elliot decided at that time he'd had enough of Chicago, and he stuck around for an extra year to make sure if Anticor works, then I'm gonna stick it out. And it did, and he said, gentlemen, I need to move on with my life. Jamie was also similarly saying, guys, I need to make money, I need to stay with what I'm doing, this isn't really in my heart anymore. And then that is when I purposely kind of like in 2006 just shut everything down. I was like, I'm gonna make 2 records, I'm gonna go back.
Is this
And
Fallen?
No, Humanoids and Cycle of the Rapist.
They were
And
good.
in the fall, it was like the fall of 2006, and it was like 6 months later, I had 2 albums written by myself, no collaborative process except for asking Dan to come in and lay beats and work some stuff out and have some live drums. But I took those live drums and I sampled everything, and I went back to like, you know, it was great stuff to work with, but it felt like it's time to just call this thing back together and make menacing, ugly records that reference. I mean, we even went back and referenced samples that we'd already used, you know, a couple of them from the same movies, and even Champagne reminded me, like, you know, I already used that last year. I'm like, I don't care. It's from a great 80s movie. It's in there, you know. The coupled release of those albums allowed us to combine the limited Crack Nation budget, and when you could take out, it's not like you're releasing a Sarah McLachlan style record and then a death metal record. They were both
Right.
part of the same family, so if we paid for an ad or we could put them both in there.
Exactly.
We could get them both, and we did tours with Cyanotic both times. We made it kind of like work as a team, and it was successful. That I wanted them both to be seen as like 2 parts of a whole. It was cool, but it was a lot of work, and I realized that you know, that's why labels do it. You can't spread. You gotta like focus. If you really have the money and you're really committed, you gotta like focus on the one.
Right.
And then now I realize when we've been putting these shows together, like, wow, the last time I put out a record was 2007. I mean, that was a long time ago, but I kind of went so full bore on those records, in my opinion. And I think some of those songs, Cervix and you know, some of the songs on the Acumen record and the Acura record, they are what people have been asking us to do again.
Strike.
Electric Surgical Strike
That was
is a
an
perfect
amazing
example. That was the song that I had just refused to do for like 8 years, and finally decided, all right, I will do the song that everyone wants us to do, and we had a blast. I mean, we played it live, and it was just those sound effects and the delivery of this really just gross, technical, surgical.
And I will say those shows
Idea.
on those tours were maybe some of the tightest Acumen shows I've
We
ever played,
had
where
problems.
we were focused and it was brutal.
There was a purpose.
And
But
that
then-
Noose guy would show up on tour too.
Yeah.
That Noose guy.
Oh, I knew.
That Noose guy would show up.
Deep Broser is a really
That,
enigmatic.
you know, then that ran its course. We did the 2 little tours. It was sort of like you play for 30 people again. You start to get discouraged. Like, why the fuck am I leaving my family? Why, you know?
So in 2008, Acumen Nation released the second installment of Artifacts with Artifacts 2, featuring songs by both the band as well as DJ AccuCrack. What inspired this continued duality?
Well, a lot of those artifact stuff were, you know, there was no Acumen and AccuCrack difference back then. They were just tracks. So songs that lent themselves more to an AccuCrack mentality, I thought, were, and that actually some of the sound effects and loops made their way into eventual AccuCrack songs, made sense to kind of note it as that versus Acumenation. Plus, I hate to say this, and this sounds really shallow, but in the iTunes internet world, you know, releasing something as a Crack Nation compilation without artist affiliation, no one was going to, you know, search or find a Crack Nation song. So I had to like say this one was an AccuCrack song. But back then, when those songs were being made, there was no AccuCrack, there was no delineation. So it's just an easy way to kind of say this one's a lot more electronic. This one should be an AccuCrack, but this one definitely made its way in. The melody found its way into an Acumen song later, so let's call it Acumen.
Okay. Just this past June, the industrial world mourned the loss of Acumen Nation's Jamie Duffy. Shortly after the event, the Cold Waves concert took place here in Chicago at the Bottom Lounge and featured supportive acts like 16 Volt, Revolting Cox, Isentilla, Cyanotic, ChemLab, and many more. What was it like to have such a base of supportive bands in a time of crisis?
Good.
It was amazing how everybody came together. It was pretty good. You know, everybody was totally within their right to say, I can't make it, I can't do it. Not all of us are, not most of us are really have the means to just pick up and travel like that. And everybody really kind of tightened up and did their part. It was very obvious from the rehearsals on that everybody had done their homework, everybody had paid attention to detail. I can't say enough about how smooth actually the show ran with regards to there being a couple of minor glitches here and there. Everything was relatively smooth and on time. It was a lot better than I think everybody had anticipated from the day of walking in to the bottom lounge of, okay, this could either fall apart or this could be brilliant, and it just turns out it was brilliant.
You know, and the only way it would have been brilliant in a normal circumstance was that Jamie would work a show like that.
Yeah.
And he did work shows like that, and he worked shows like that we were playing with. And we would always be upset, like, you're putting so much work in it. We just flew in or drove in, we're playing with 8 other bands, and you are spending all your time with these other bands, like helping them, like, you're gonna be with us on stage, who's gonna give us your treatment?
Right.
And he and I got into it all the time, like, you are giving all these other guys the best. And then they sound great, and we get up, and then we have the
They were
sound guy
years.
that just woke up because, well, I got this other guy doing everything, and we would sound poor, and we never got past his. He just didn't understand it. We had
Nobody's.
ego. There was no ego. Like his bands, I thought, like, show a little ego and say, they flew us in here, they're paying us, we should sound good, but you're worried about the 4 opening bands. I mean, that's nice, but don't go so far as to fuck us then later that we don't sound good, because the house guy who has been asleep for the last few hours is gonna.
But that's the tech head. That's the tech head, and
But it was also
cautious.
that's what got
It was
this
passion.
show off the ground, though, was everybody saying, what can we do? People were constantly trying to help another band that might have needed something or needed to sound better, making recommendations to the sound man, like trying to help everything together. And
Well, Greg, Elliot, you guys are out of towners, so you might be able to speak to the idea of like, he's your brother, but also you have to come in and learn new things. Like, what are the like immediate obstacles that you face doing that?
Yeah, well, for me, having been out of the band the longest amount of time, it was interesting because I had fresh ears when I went back to listen to the music again, and it definitely made me realize how much I enjoyed playing the songs when I was in the band and how much I missed doing it. So that was really cool. And I think also, you know, when we look at that concert in particular, I don't think any of those bands would have gotten together for somebody else.
No.
I think Jamie's involvement with all of them was so great, and I think everybody that got the benefit of working with Jamie realized, you know, he's worked so hard for us for so many years. We'll do whatever we can. We'll move mountains. We'll lose money. We'll take flights in the middle of the night. We'll practice with people that we don't really know that well to put the show together. And, you know, it's our way, sadly, of giving back to him afterwards. It would have been great if we could have given some back to him while he was still around. But
you're right.
But his uniting nature as a person is why that show was a success.
You know, and a lot of those guys, I'm gonna name Eric Powell, Dan Neat, Jared, myself, FJ. I mean, there are a lot of people who have had scarred friendships that some people haven't been spoken for years. There's 2 or 3, there's 5 or 6 other guys I can, Seabold, Chris Connolly, there's a lot of people that for whatever, we were involved in a gross little family diorama built, you know, we were in this world of industrial, incestuous kind of, we'd go on tours, we'd see each other, the next thing you know, that guy's running sound on a tour, and now you're playing in another band. But we didn't talk for years. There was people that didn't speak for years. And we all knew when Jamie passed that, like, it's time to reach out and talk to each other and say, can you do this? And we built a budget based on what we could come up with to at least fly a couple guys in. Originally, I thought I would be able to fly a lead singer in and maybe his guitarist. And then we would back them up with some local drummer or bass. And a couple of bands were like, no, we're just going to bring our whole band in. I would still say, we don't have that in the budget. And they'd say it's on our dime. and you could see like all night the way people were responding to it and the way everybody came together. I never had to ask anybody. I had to just tell people, you know, and that was what was cool. I never had to say, hey, I really would love it if you were a part of it. I just had to say, you know that Jamie passed and you know how we need to honor him, and they were like, when? And that was it.
And everybody did go above and beyond and help as much as they possibly could. There was not a shortage of free hands around to do what needed to be done, which was nice.
But I think all of us and all our hugs and all of our tears last night all had the same feeling of like, why couldn't we have done this? But that's because life is, we're selfish and and not in a bad way, but you have to, no one's just gonna go like, hey, remember the hot cold wave scene of the mid-90s? Let's just make a concert of that and hope it works out.
Right.
And everybody be like, we're too busy. And so, you know, what Jamie, his passing allowed everybody to wake up and go, don't let this slip away without this.
Yeah.
And we were able to, and in retrospect, and later on, we might even say we exploited it. You might actually say,
Nope.
wait a minute though.
No.
Half of the bands that performed on that stage, I'm gonna say this with my band included, had no right, based on their previous fan base and sales, to perform in front of a sold out 700.
Do you have an example
Right,
though?
right.
Do you have an example?
Half the bands, any of us,
Which ones?
all of us.
Czar?
I disagree.
No, even
Like-
16 volt, even. I mean, I'm not saying that they're not deserving of that. I'm not saying that Cyanotic and Jim Warza's, Jim Marcus's Die Warzone new project No Fight isn't deserving of playing in front of 600 people, but god damn it, if they went out on tour on their own, if any of those bands went out on a tour, including the only band except for the Cox guys, love them to death, they would be able to play in front of those crowds. The rest of us, we were part of something that.
I think exploit's the wrong word. I think
You're right, but you do understand what I'm saying.
harness the awesomeness of Jamie because he was involved with every band that played.
So
It was truly a glorious thing that
We had a
happened.
reward at the end, and we were all in
was
front
done
of a crowd that nobody would have been able to harness on their own. But as a collective and under the right circumstances, we were able to connect with them and have a moment that we would never have otherwise been afforded. And Jamie's passing brought all that back together. Hugging Eric Powell and holding Eric Powell, watching Dan
That poor
and
kid
Eric.
sing those boots for the first time.
Yeah,
haven't
like
seen them
we've been in
since.
Chicago. There's been benefit shows, and they always put the boots up. And I was like, I think we should keep that tradition alive. And those guys were like, it crushed
It
them.
was new to them.
Right, but we had gone through our experience in Chicago playing a show and going to 2 other benefit shows, and for some reason these boots would show up, and at first we were like, I don't know if I can do this, but then by the end of the show it just felt so great and so good, and you almost had to tell these guys, I know it's going to seem weird at first, but by the end of the night you will be like making out with those boots. They will just be there. It'll be really great, but at first your instinct is like, that's tacky, or that's like something distasteful about it, but it grew into being this thing that, when we were doing the Revolting Cox set and everything failed and everything fell apart, and the guy that had helped Jamie do the Wax Trax retrospective for Revolting Cox, his assistant was there helping me, and we were both looking at each other like, it's all failing, like Pro Tools is shutting down, lines are failing, chords that worked today are not working. You know what? And he kept, while the Revco show was going, he would reach up and grab one of those boots, and he'd get behind it. And would just fucking beat him down. And he's like,
those things.
he's like, I can't
Clay People's a
believe
great
this
example. Like
happened.
something's failing, Jamie would have fixed that, but no Jamie.
So I fixed it.
Where'd he go? Where'd he go?
Yeah, man.
Oh, it's somewhere.
Yeah.
Jamie Duffy, baby. Jamie Duffy.
Elliot. Please help us.
I want to say for Jamie Dubo.
Jamie Duffy.
Mm.
We go.
So with Cold Waves being just yesterday, have you started thinking if you're going to do anything next year in honor of Jamie?
Somebody said that it would be a neat idea. Just last night, somebody actually said, "What about year anniversary?"
Like an anniversary show.
So what about we do year anniversary?
Especially
Whole
in
lot of
Chicago.
chemistry going on.
Possibly even a festival
But I
each year.
I personally was so not even. I'd be very interested, but couldn't even fathom with the amount of work and the amount of trouble.
You had like
He
20 hours of sleep over the
basically
last
Jason did
2 months.
90% of a lot of the technical legwork that made that show come
In
off
addition
the
to
way it
the
did.
organization part
So-
too.
Yeah, he's a
And
musician. He doesn't.
But
he doesn't
we're not
do that.
talking about just what
Tattoo,
took
let's
place at the
see
show. We're talking about
Zoom in
merchandise.
on
We're
this
talking
shit
about
right here.
everything that went into it. We're talking about a lot of the logistics. We're talking about planning. We're talking about taking on the task of building tracks with you don't have the proper tools to do it because they're missing in somebody's.
Booking the flights, you know, paying. But if it did happen, that'd be fantastic. But
That's it.
But, you know, again, like I've been the most cynical one of the bunch talking about how we were allowed to play in front.
You're a realist.
I haven't played in front of
He's the
700
Lord.
people in many years, and I was aware of that, and I felt blessed and guilty, you know. But, so if we did it again, is it about, you know, what is it about? Who's the right people to make it come about so that's not about commerce, so that, you know, if it's done for the right reasons and people realize that like these are fleeting moments for these bands and their connection, you know, if we could make it happen, I would almost volunteer to be in a different city, you know.
Yeah, maybe a revolving city.
Maybe in Washington D.C. Maybe in, you know, where's the biggest stronghold of the next group of people outside of Chicago that would appreciate that? I would say pay homage and credence to that and put your money where your mouth is, and if you want to do part two, do it in another city. Instead of just take for granted when we're in Chicago, we can just pull this off and get everyone else to travel. I'd say if we want to do it again, we'll go. We'll go, and we'll go to LA and New York.
But then
or-
somebody else got to be the point person
Yes.
and do all the other stuff
I would
because
love to.
that's one of the
So
key
next time
elements.
Portland then.
Yeah, maybe Portland, maybe Seattle,
You know, Eric
maybe
Powell is
Austin,
so
maybe
nice.
somewhere, maybe
He
maybe,
is. He really is.
He
But
is
also,
nice.
to credit Jamie, it would have to be totally new music because that kid ate up music all the time.
He did, and I will
Oh,
say,
yeah.
I will say one thing
Like,
about
it would-
all of this.
We
like,
don't know the
it-
genre that
it,
that festival would be.
It oddly enough took a tragedy to bring all these people together and have them really put their fucking money where their mouth is because this was not easy. Everybody was physically and mentally challenged to have to really pull it together, and it's.
I think the people that
I
were
mean,
part
I
of it
told
were
Jamie's
mentally
mother
challenged.
there's probably maybe 1 out of 10 people in my life ever that I would go to these lengths for. So that's important.
On a good night, every one of those bands would have needed a half an hour to set up their shit, and everybody was told like if you know be and bands were ready. They had their guitars, they had their keyboards, and they pulled it off. And a lot of that stuff is janky, you know, all the loops, all the clicks, all the computers, all the whatever. And I had this big fantasy that every band was going to send me their backing tracks and their loops with their clicks, and I was going to build this master session so that it would never be, no lines would change, no samplers. It was just going to be a master session with clicks, and we always know that that's fine. And the only people actually doing anything are guitarists switching lines and drummers switching snares, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't feasible. For some reason, we just kept them all together. And,
Very good, buddy.
but that's the kind of thing that Jamie would have tried to do. He looms. I was trying to create a backing track loom. I have more chords in the studio that he has duct taped together because he had a MIDI chord.
Notified. He
He had a
notarized.
MIDI chord, a power chord, and a line. And he would say, if they're going to the same place, let's make one giant loom chord. And he'd have them all wrapped together. You know what? How many times I'm out of chords and I'm cutting through his fucking looms just to get the power chord out so I can do something. But that's the way I thought we would pull this show off, was like looming these things together. And hallelujah, there we go. Your relationship with that dog.
Making everybody a
Hey, no,
Very good.
I'll put the end on that. It's much like Jamie's relationship to music.
Oh,
He embraced it all, and we lost him.
How profound, wizard.
He did not embrace it all.
He really did, though.
He did. Now you know what?
Oh,
Listen,
he
listen,
liked Britney Spears' Toxic.
Listen,
He liked a
also
bunch of
liked
crazy
Tupac.
shit.
Press stop.
Yeah, so
listen,
it's good.
Jamie Duffy was an awesome
Yeah, I
fucking
think you're right.
curmudgeon.
Hey,
He would
thank you.
cringe. Oh my